Hi everyone. Let me start by thanking InterReach for helping celebrate the 10th birthday of Integration and Implementation Insights, and for inviting me to talk a bit about the origins, some surprises, and where next. I'm really sorry I can't be with you, middle of the night for me, but if you have questions or comments, please put them in the comments and I'm sure they'll be passed on and I'll do my best to address them. So I wanted to start a bit about talking about the origins, and there's been a driving question for my research for the last more than 20 years, 25 or more years. And it's about when we tackle complex societal and environmental problems, how do we find the useful tools, concepts, methods, processes, frameworks? And we know that they're in systems thinking, inter and transdisciplinarity, action research, science of team science, but how do we bring them together? And that's been kind of the driving question for me. These all operate in silos. How do we bridge those silos? The origins came about in a particular way, I guess, for me. So I should point out that it wasn't possible to study systems thinking or inter and transdisciplinarity in the 1970s when I was an undergraduate. In fact, right at the end of my undergraduate work, people just started to talk about multidisciplinarity. And I spent the first 20 years or so of my career ricocheting through the university trying to find where this multidisciplinarity stuff hung out. In the 1990s, as a mid-career, I had the opportunity to lead a research project on a complex problem. And what was really clear was that there was very little guidance on how to do it, and we operated by the seat of our pants. And after 7 years, when it was all over, I was really interested in what we could have used if we'd known about it, and had the opportunity to go to a bunch of conferences, including the World Congress on Systems Sciences, the Association for Interdisciplinary Studies Conference. Insights didn't exist then, transdisciplinarity conferences didn't exist then, but I went to what there was and discovered they were tiny, they were really useful. None of them covered all the territory. All of them had something useful to offer. And so that really made me start thinking about how do we bring this together? How do we bridge these silos? And I started thinking about, well, what if we had a discipline of integration and implementation sciences? And the point of that discipline was to be the plumbing that connected all of these different approaches and made all of their valuable stuff useful. It wasn't about homogenizing them, it was about maintaining the differences because they've got interesting historical and theoretical differences, but it was about how do we harness the tools that they all provide. So our initial step was to develop a website for integration and implementation sciences in 2002. It had resources that I found and added. We produced a newsletter every 2 months that advertised a new resource. And the reality is that the newsletter was the trigger to go and find a resource. So I scramble around, find a resource, put it on the website, and then we could publish it in the newsletter. The positive of that is that it showed by that starting small but continuing over time allowed you to build a pretty substantial toolkit. The negative was that the toolkit was a bit haphazard and opportunistic because of the way that it was formed. And not that long ago, we decided to dismantle it because it was no point trying to run 2 toolkits at the same time. And we moved the useful resources, most of them at least, across to i2 Insights. The opportunity to do a blog and repository, the opportunity for i2 Insights came about when through the US National Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center, which in 2015 invited me to be a theme leader, which meant I had oversight of 3 projects. And my job as theme leader was to look for synergies between the projects. What could they learn from each other? And I thought that a blog that they contributed to might be a useful thing to do. And so that's what we did. It meant that I had a captive audience to start the blog, which was very, very useful. People were reasonably happy to do it. And at the end of the day, So the blog became a way of sharing resources across the projects, and this tag lets you see all the resources. And at the end of the day, we ended up with 63 contributions, and the blog currently has just under 600, so more than 10% of the contributions came through this opportunity with Succinct. I was asked to talk a bit about surprises, and I want to talk about 3. So one is that there have been some really high achieving posts, which was a bit of a surprise. This graph shows on the vertical axis the number of posts, on the horizontal axis the number of views. There's a break in the scale on the vertical axis, and there's also some truncated data. And I'm going to talk about some of the truncated data. So there was a post in 2017 which has had almost 500,000 views, and there's another post in 2022 which is catching up fast. It's already had 100,000. Why? No idea. An inkling is that occasionally I'll get a ping back, which means that somebody cites the blog and then asks you in return to cite them, and it'll come from an undergraduate student who's doing and it'll be in an essay that they've written. So I'm assuming that the blog's been picked up by students as part of their undergraduate coursework. To give you an idea of what those large numbers mean, the median lifetime views currently is just under 900. Another surprise is that it's been widely viewed, which has been fantastic. So the United Nations has 193 member nations, and it's been viewed in all of them according to the stats from WordPress. It's a WordPress blog. This is a WordPress figure. I'm a bit dubious about the views from North Korea and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is in major civil war, and South Sudan. But in any case, it's fair to say that it's been viewed quite widely. It is mainly viewed in the global north. The dark colours is where the most viewers are, but it's pleasing to see that India and South Africa have got darker colours, and that the number of views is growing. And as many of you will know, making the blog an outlet for people from the global south to talk about what they do is a hugely important aspect of what I've been trying to do. And the third surprise is that the index has been useful for revamping the framework. So this is the I2S framework, the discipline framework, as it was. This is the second version of it that was around in about 2000. It was about bringing together disciplinary and stakeholder knowledge, understanding unknowns, and bringing those together to develop support for policy and practice. Each of these should be seen as a pentagonal silo, and within those silos you had stored concepts and methods and guides. Try as I might, I could never really make that work as a way of organising the resources in either the original website or in i2 Insights when it started. And then a couple of years ago, we started to think, well, maybe we should do something about this framework and work backwards. And it turned out that the way that we'd organised the resources in the blog was actually really useful for thinking about a framework for the discipline. I'm not going to go through this in detail. Some of you will have seen it, but it's kind of useful. It's maybe not that surprising because it happened in my brain and it means some neurons connected. But for me, it was a really pleasant surprise to find that the way that we'd used to organise the blog posts, which worked for all the blog posts that we've done, was also a way that we could develop a framework that worked more broadly for what it was that we were trying to do. So where next? We're going to celebrate on November the 25th with a celebratory blog post. We're going to do some minor rebranding from blog and repository to Global Comprehensive Living Toolkit. We're going to reinvigorate the aims, and we're going to invite people to contribute to strengthening how the toolkit meets those aims. So keep an eye out for that blog post in November, and it would be great to have your contributions. And of course, I'm also really curious about what's going to get triggered by this InterReach webinar series. The second thing that I've been thinking about is long-term sustainability. I'm not going to live forever, and so is this worth preserving? If so, what would be a good institutional home? What would we preserve? What would we change? Who would undertake the different tasks? How would we make it funded? So those are the things that are occupying me. And if you've got any comments on or questions on any of this, as I said, please put them in the comments and I'll reply to that. I want to finish with a bunch of acknowledgements, particularly to Peter Dean, who's been an extraordinary colleague over the last 20 or more years. And let me also thank again InterReach for what's going to be a really exciting webinar series. I can hardly wait to listen to all the recordings. Thank you all very much.